Chapter 1. The Beginning of a Dream, 1970s. The streets of New York buzzed with energy. It was the city of skyscrapers, dreams, and second chances. But for Donald Trump, there was no plan for second chances. He wanted to win on the first try. He was young, only in his late 20s. But his eyes carried the sharp focus of someone much older. The city was fast, but Donald liked fast. He walked with purpose, his polished shoes clicking against the busy pavement of Manhattan. The air smelled of ambition and opportunity, mixed with the usual street noise of car horns and the chatter of pedestrians. Donald had grown up in Queens, in a comfortable home with his family. His father, Fred Trump, was a successful real estate developer. Fred built homes in working-class neighborhoods and taught Donald the basics of business. But Donald didn't want to stay in Queens. He had bigger dreams. He wanted Manhattan, the tall buildings, the luxury hotels, the skyline that seemed to touch the clouds. One day, as Donald stared out at the city from his car window, he made a promise to himself. He would become the biggest name in real estate. In the 1970s, New York was both thrilling and dangerous. The city was struggling with crime and a financial crisis, but it was also a place of reinvention. People from across the world came to New York to make a name for themselves. For Donald, this was his chance. He started small, working under his father's guidance. Fred had connections, but Donald wanted to carve his own path. He was smart, confident, and unafraid to take risks. He bought an old run-down hotel near Central Park and began turning it into the luxurious Grand Hyatt. But nothing was easy. There were moments of doubt. Bankers didn't always trust him because he was young and had limited experience. Negotiations were tense. Contractors missed deadlines. But Donald loved the challenge. The setbacks made him stronger. He worked long hours, barely sleeping. If a deal went bad, he found another way. If someone said no, he asked again. Then came a moment that changed his life forever. One evening, Donald attended a high-profile event in New York City. He wore a tailored suit, the kind that made him stand out even in a crowded room. The music was soft, the lights dim, and the atmosphere electric. Guests mingled, sipping champagne and talking business. Donald scanned the room, his sharp eyes noticing everything. And then, he saw her. She had blonde hair, styled elegantly, and a bright smile. She was different from anyone he had ever met. Her name was Ivana Zelnichkova, a model and former competitive skier from Czechoslovakia. Ivana was confident, just like Donald. She had her own dreams of success, though hers had brought her to fashion instead of real estate. Their first conversation was light but intriguing. She was curious about his business ambitions, and he was impressed by her independence. As the evening continued, they laughed, shared stories, and discovered they had more in common than they expected. Both had strong work ethics. Both wanted to make a mark on the world. By the end of the night, Donald knew this wasn't just a casual encounter. There was something magnetic about Ivana. She was ambitious, but she also brought warmth to his world, a world that was often cold and competitive. Over the next few months, they grew closer. They spent weekends exploring New York City and attending high society events. Ivana supported Donald's business ideas, and he admired her resilience. She had left her home country to find success in a foreign land, just as he was fighting for recognition in the cutthroat world of Manhattan real estate. But their love story wasn't just about romance. Donald believed in creating partnerships, not just marriages. He saw in Ivana someone who could stand by his side, not behind him. They were both ambitious, and that sometimes created tension. In private, Donald was intense. His mind was always on the next deal, the next project, the next big thing. But Ivana understood this. She was also driven and respected his hunger for success. However, even in the happiest moments, there were signs of the pressure that would come later. Ivana wanted a family, but she also wanted to continue her career. Donald wanted a wife who could manage both family life and business challenges. It was a delicate balance, one that wouldn't always be easy to maintain. As the 1970s came to a close, Donald and Ivana's relationship deepened. He proposed to her in a way that reflected his style, bold and confident. They married in 1977 in a lavish ceremony filled with powerful guests, elegant flowers, and the buzz of media attention. Donald was now a married man, and Ivana was more than just a wife. She was a partner in his growing empire. After the wedding, they worked as a team. Ivana helped with Trump Tower, Donald's most ambitious project yet. The building would become a symbol of luxury and success in the heart of Manhattan. Ivana's design sense and business skills played a key role in its success. But Donald's name was always the one in the spotlight. At times, Ivana wished for more credit. Donald's need to always be the center of attention created small cracks in their perfect image, but she loved him, and for now, that was enough. The young man who once dreamed of making his mark on New York was now one step closer to his goal. But as Donald stood on the observation deck of his nearly finished Trump Tower, looking out at the skyline, he felt something strange. He wasn't satisfied. Success was never enough for him. He wanted more power, more influence, and more control. His dream had started, but the journey had only just begun. And while he didn't know it yet, his marriage to Ivana would be the beginning of a love story filled with passion, heartbreak, and lessons that would shape the man he would become. Chapter 2. Donald and Ivana, the Power Couple, 1977. In April 1977, the wedding bells rang. The church was grand. White flowers decorated the entrance. The guests, dressed in elegant suits and gowns, whispered among themselves. Everyone wanted to witness the union of Donald Trump and Ivana Zelnichkova. Donald stood tall, his black tuxedo perfectly tailored. His smile was proud, confident. Ivana arrived in a stunning white dress. She looked radiant. Her veil flowed behind her like a river of silk. As she walked down the aisle, all eyes were on her, but her gaze was fixed on Donald. When they said their vows, they didn't just promise love. They promised partnership. Together, they would build a life of ambition and success. The ceremony ended with applause. Cameras flashed as they exited the church. The press described it as a fairy tale wedding, and for a time, it felt like one. The reception was lavish. Guests enjoyed champagne and gourmet dishes. Music filled the air as Donald and Ivana shared their first dance. The room shimmered with gold decorations and crystal chandeliers. It was a night of celebration, but for Donald, it was more than that. This was the start of his dream marriage. The honeymoon was short. Donald didn't like long vacations. He had work to do. But Ivana didn't mind. She was also driven. After their return, they both dived into their roles. Donald focused on expanding his real estate empire. He bought buildings, made deals, and met investors. He wanted more skyscrapers, more hotels, and more fame. Ivana was no ordinary wife. She wasn't content to stay at home. Donald respected that. He gave her responsibilities in the company. She managed the Plaza Hotel, helped design Trump Tower, and added luxury touches to their properties. Her style was elegant, her decisions smart. Together, they became a power couple, two forces working as one. In the 1980s, Donald and Ivana were everywhere. They appeared on magazine covers. Photographers captured them at gala events and charity balls. Donald, with his commanding presence, charmed reporters and businessmen. Ivana, with her grace and charm, impressed designers and socialites. They were admired by many. At home, they were parents. Ivana gave birth to Donald Jr. in 1978, followed by Ivanka in 1981 and Eric in 1984. Family photos showed smiles, vacations, and birthday parties. But raising children wasn't always easy. Donald was often busy, attending meetings and flying to different cities. Ivana managed the household and balanced her work at the same time. Despite their success, there were cracks beneath the surface. Ivana worked hard, but she sometimes felt overshadowed. Donald made most of the big decisions. He liked to be in control. Ivana's opinions weren't always considered, and it frustrated her. Meanwhile, Donald was feeling pressure too. His empire was growing fast, but that also meant high risks. If a deal failed, millions of dollars could be lost. The stress of work began to follow him home. Late nights at the office became normal. Phone calls interrupted family dinners. Ivana noticed the change, but didn't complain. At least, not at first. By 1985, Trump Tower stood tall in the heart of Manhattan. It was a symbol of Donald's success, a glass and gold monument to his ambition. Ivana had played a big role in its design. She oversaw every detail, from the marble floors to the grand entrance. But at the opening ceremony, when Donald spoke to the crowd, he barely mentioned her contributions. Ivana smiled politely, but inside, she felt disappointed. Their life looked perfect on the outside, but behind closed doors, arguments began to happen more often. Donald wanted things done his way. Ivana wanted more freedom to make decisions. They were both strong-willed, and neither liked to back down. One evening, as the children slept upstairs, Donald and Ivana sat in the living room. The fire crackled softly, but the atmosphere was tense. Donald had just returned from a meeting that had gone badly. He was tired and frustrated. "I work as hard as you do," Ivana said, her voice steady. "But you don't see it." Donald sighed. "I see it, Ivana. But this is my name on the buildings. My reputation is at stake." Ivana looked away. "I thought we were partners," she whispered. "We are," he replied, but the words felt hollow. He didn't know how to balance his need for control with her desire for recognition. Still, they continued to build their empire. The Plaza Hotel became one of their most famous projects, and Ivana was at the center of it. She managed renovations, oversaw staff, and turned the hotel into a luxurious destination. Her work was praised, but Donald often took the credit. It hurt her, but she didn't show it publicly. In 1987, Donald published his book, The Art of the Deal. It was a bestseller and made him even more famous. But with fame came more attention. The media followed their every move. Gossip columns speculated about their marriage. Were they happy, or was their perfect image just for show? Ivana tried to ignore the rumors, but doubts crept in. Donald was spending more time away, meeting powerful people and attending events without her. She wondered if their marriage could survive his growing ambitions. By the late 1980s, tension was building. Small arguments turned into bigger ones. Trust began to weaken. Ivana loved Donald, but she felt like she was losing him to his success. Donald loved Ivana, but he couldn't slow down. His hunger for power consumed him. One night, after another argument, Ivana sat alone in the bedroom. She held a photo of their wedding day and traced the edges of her dress with her finger. Was this the life she had dreamed of? The woman who had once felt unstoppable now felt unsure of her place. But Donald didn't notice. He was focused on the next deal, the next building, the next achievement. The cracks in their marriage had widened, but neither of them was ready to face it yet. The power couple that once seemed untouchable was beginning to crumble, but the world wouldn't know it until much later. To outsiders, Donald and Ivana were still a perfect pair, but inside their golden walls, things were slowly falling apart. Chapter 3. Family and Ambition. In December 1977, Donald and Ivana Trump became parents for the first time. Their son, Donald Jr., was born on a cold winter day in New York City. The hospital room was warm, filled with the cries of their newborn. Ivana held him gently, her eyes soft with love. Donald stood beside her, smiling proudly. He felt like a winner. He had a son, a future heir. The couple's joy was real, but life didn't slow down. Soon after Donald Jr.'s birth, Donald returned to work. He had buildings to build, contracts to sign, and investors to please. "This is only the beginning," he often said. Ivana understood. She was also ambitious, but her life was now divided between motherhood and her work in Donald's growing empire. In 1981, their second child arrived, a baby girl named Ivanka. Ivana was overjoyed to have a daughter. She imagined dressing her in beautiful clothes and teaching her the strength of being a successful woman. Donald was thrilled, too, though his excitement was brief. Just days after Ivanka's birth, he was back in the office, working on a new hotel deal. Ivana often managed things on her own. She juggled feedings, diaper changes, and late-night cries, while still handling her responsibilities in the business. Her days were long and exhausting. Some mornings, she left the apartment at sunrise, dropping the kids with a nanny before heading to the office. At night, she returned to tuck them into bed and tell them stories. But not every bedtime had a happy ending. Sometimes the children asked, "Where's Daddy?" Ivana would smile gently and say, "He's working." But inside, she wished he were home more often. Donald wasn't a bad father. He loved his children deeply. But he showed his love in his own way. Instead of bedtime stories or weekend outings, he gave them advice. Be strong. Be smart. Take risks, he told Donald Jr. as the boy grew older. Never settle for less. The children idolized him. When Donald Jr. played with toy blocks, he pretended to be his father, building towers and bridges. Ivanka loved to sit at her mother's desk, pretending to run a hotel. To them, success wasn't just a dream. It was part of who they were. In 1984, the family welcomed their third child, Eric. By now, Donald's empire was booming. He had bought luxury properties, expanded his portfolio, and made headlines. The family lived in a lavish apartment at the top of Trump Tower, surrounded by gold accents and marble floors. From their windows, they could see the city stretch for miles. But despite the luxury, there was tension. Ivana was under pressure. Raising 3 children while managing business projects wasn't easy. Sometimes she stayed up late, answering work emails or reviewing hotel renovation plans. Her phone rang constantly. Nannies helped during the day, but the emotional weight of motherhood was always on her shoulders. Donald faced his own stress. Running a real estate empire meant constant decisions, meetings, and negotiations. If a deal fell through, millions of dollars could be lost. He felt the pressure to keep growing, to stay ahead of his competitors. There was no time to slow down. When Donald and Ivana did spend time together, their conversations often turned into business discussions. They talked about deals, marketing strategies, and future projects. The romance that once filled their evenings had faded. Their marriage had become a partnership in every sense, both personal and professional. One evening, after putting the children to bed, Ivana sat alone in the living room. The lights were dim, and the hum of the city drifted in through the windows. Donald walked in, his tie loosened, carrying a stack of documents. "I need to review these," he said, placing the papers on the table. Ivana looked up. Can't it wait until tomorrow? Donald hesitated. There's a meeting early in the morning. I have to be ready. She sighed, but didn't argue. This was their life now. Work always came first. Despite the tension, they both believed they were building something greater than themselves. They saw their family as part of their legacy. One day, our children will take over, Donald often said. Ivana agreed, but deep down, she worried. Would their marriage survive until then? The media continued to paint them as the perfect family. Magazine articles showed photos of Donald, Ivana, and the children smiling at charity events, vacationing in Aspen, or posing at business galas. But behind the smiles, cracks were growing. Ivana missed the early days of their relationship when they laughed more and worked less. She missed having dinner without interruptions from phone calls. But she didn't show her frustration in public. She had been raised to be strong, to never reveal weakness. Donald, on the other hand, thrived on public attention. He enjoyed the fame, the interviews, and the flashing cameras. He liked being recognized as a successful businessman and a family man. But he didn't see the sacrifices Ivana was making. He was too focused on winning. One summer afternoon, they took the children on a yacht trip along the coast. The weather was perfect, the sea calm. Donald Jr. and Eric played on deck while Ivanka helped her mother prepare snacks. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Donald leaned back in his chair, sunglasses shielding his eyes. "This is what life is all about," he said, sipping a drink. Ivana smiled, but her mind wandered. She wondered how long these peaceful moments would last. Would they always be chasing success? Would they ever have time to slow down? By the late 1980s, the family had achieved incredible wealth and recognition. But success came at a cost. Ivana grew more independent, taking on bigger roles in the company. She wanted to prove that she was more than just Donald Trump's wife. Donald respected her ambition, but didn't always appreciate her need for independence. Their arguments became more frequent. Sometimes the children heard their raised voices through the walls. But the next morning, everything seemed normal again, at least on the surface. Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric loved their parents deeply. To them, their family was special. But even they could sense the distance growing between their mother and father. In public, Donald and Ivana continued to act like the perfect couple. They smiled for the cameras, held hands at events, and praised each other in interviews. But behind closed doors, they were drifting apart. As the 1990s approached, the pressure of family and ambition would soon reach its breaking point. Chapter 4. The Divorce Drama. 1992. It began with whispers, quiet rumors that spread from boardrooms to dinner parties. But soon, the whispers turned into headlines splashed across the front pages of newspapers. Trump's secret affair with Marla Maples. The news hit Ivana like a wave, crashing against her heart. She had heard stories before, but she had never imagined it could be this real, this public. Marla Maples wasn't just a passing fling. She was someone Donald had grown close to. The affair had lasted months, maybe even longer. One evening, Ivana sat by the fireplace in their luxurious apartment at Trump Tower. The city lights flickered outside, but inside, her world felt dark. She held the newspaper in her hands, reading the words over and over. It felt like a bad dream. Donald walked into the room, but he didn't sit down. His face was tense, his eyes avoiding hers. "Ivana, we need to talk," he said, his voice low but steady. She didn't look up. "Talk about what? The entire world already knows," she replied, bitterness in her tone. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said. But Ivana wasn't interested in apologies. Her trust had been broken. The media frenzy was relentless. Cameras followed Ivana wherever she went. Reporters shouted questions at her, asking how she felt about the betrayal. At first, she remained silent. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing her pain. But inside, she was hurting. Her marriage had been built on love and partnership, or so she thought. Donald tried to control the damage. His public image was everything to him. He released statements denying parts of the affair or downplaying its seriousness. But the tabloids didn't stop. They published photos of him with Marla on vacation. They printed quotes from anonymous sources, claiming the affair had started long before Ivana found out. For Donald, it wasn't just a personal crisis. It was a business crisis, too. Investors were watching. Business partners worried that the scandal would affect deals. Trump Tower was more than a home. It was the heart of his empire. He couldn't afford for it to crumble. But at home, things were worse. Ivana had been strong throughout her career and marriage, but now she felt fragile. She worried about the children. How would Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric handle this? Would they be teased at school? Would they lose respect for their father? She didn't have answers. One morning, Ivana sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. The sunlight streamed through the window, but it did little to brighten her mood. Ivanka entered, still in her pajamas. The young girl could sense that something was wrong. "Mom, are you and Dad okay?" she asked softly. Ivana hesitated. "We're having problems, sweetie, but everything will be fine." She kissed her daughter's forehead and forced a smile. But inside, she wasn't sure if things would ever be fine again. Meanwhile, Donald met with lawyers. He knew a divorce was inevitable, but he wanted to protect his assets. Ivana had played a major role in his success, and legally, she had rights to part of the empire. The legal battle began behind closed doors, but soon the details leaked to the press. The public watched every move as if it were a soap opera. Ivana hired top lawyers. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her children. She wanted financial security, but more importantly, she wanted custody. Her children were her world. She couldn't imagine a future without them by her side. The divorce process dragged on for months. In courtrooms and private meetings, arguments unfolded over property, money, and custody. Donald was determined to protect his brand. Ivana was determined to protect her family. Their once loving partnership had turned into a battle. Despite the tension, there were moments of vulnerability. Late at night, when the children were asleep, Ivana often cried alone. She missed the man she had married, the one who had once danced with her at galas and whispered dreams of success in her ear. But that man seemed distant now, buried beneath ambition and betrayal. Donald, too, struggled with regret. He had built so much, but now his family was falling apart. He wanted to fix things, but he didn't know how. Apologies wouldn't undo the damage. One evening, they met in the study to discuss the custody arrangement. The air was heavy with unspoken words. Ivana sat on one side of the room, Donald on the other. "We need to think about what's best for the kids," Ivana said, her voice firm but calm. "I agree," Donald replied. "They shouldn't suffer because of us." For a moment, they shared a rare moment of understanding. Both of them loved their children deeply. Despite their differences, they wanted to shield the kids from the chaos. In 1992, the divorce was finalized. Ivana gained custody of the children, along with a significant financial settlement. Donald retained control of his properties, but the emotional cost of the divorce couldn't be measured in money. It had changed them both. Ivana moved into a new home with the children. She focused on giving them stability. She continued working in fashion and business, determined to rebuild her life. "I won't let this break me," she often told herself. And slowly, she began to heal. Donald also moved on, but the memories of the divorce stayed with him. He learned lessons about love, trust, and the price of ambition. The scandal had affected his public image, but it hadn't destroyed him. If anything, it made him more determined to prove himself. For the children, the divorce was a difficult chapter, but they adapted. Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric remained close to both parents. They saw their mother as a role model of resilience and their father as a symbol of ambition. Years later, Ivana reflected on the marriage. "We had beautiful moments," she said in an interview, "but success can be dangerous. It can pull people apart." Donald also reflected on those years. "Ivana was important to me," he admitted. "We built a lot together. I'll always respect her." In the end, their story wasn't just about betrayal and heartbreak. It was about survival. They both moved forward, carrying the lessons of their past as they created new futures. Chapter 5. The Marla Maples Affair. Love or Lust? It started with a spark, a chance meeting at a party in the late 1980s. The room was filled with powerful people, but Donald Trump's eyes landed on one person, Marla Maples. She was young, with golden hair and a bright smile. She radiated energy. For a man like Donald, who thrived on excitement, Marla was impossible to ignore. They exchanged a few words, But those words lingered long after the night ended. Marla was different from Ivana. She was soft-spoken, warm, and had a playful charm. Where Ivana had been a partner in business, Marla was a breath of fresh air. At first it was just casual, secret phone calls, private dinners in quiet restaurants. But the connection between them grew quickly. Marla admired Donald's success and confidence. He loved her attention, the way she made him feel young again. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. Donald was still married to Ivana, but the marriage had become strained. Their arguments were frequent. At home, they were partners in public, but distant behind closed doors. Donald found comfort in Marla, and she gave him the affection he felt was missing. One night, as they walked along the beach in Palm Beach, Florida, Marla turned to him. "What do you want from this?" she asked softly. The moon reflected off the waves, creating a peaceful backdrop for a difficult question. Donald didn't answer right away. He looked out at the water, thinking. Was this just an escape from his troubled marriage, or did he truly care for her? He wasn't sure, but he didn't want to lose the excitement Marla brought into his life. The affair stayed hidden at first. Marla wasn't interested in causing a scandal. She believed that maybe Donald would leave Ivana for her when the time was right. But time wasn't on their side. The media had started digging. Donald's life was always under a spotlight, and the press had begun to suspect something. One morning, Donald woke to find his face plastered across tabloids. The headlines were brutal. Trump's secret romance and the other woman revealed. Marla was no longer a private secret. She was now a public figure. The news hit Marla hard. Paparazzi followed her everywhere. They camped outside her apartment and bombarded her with questions. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, and it made her nervous. Donald, however, was used to the chaos. He told her to stay calm. "It'll blow over," he said confidently. But Marla wasn't so sure. For Ivana, the headlines were humiliating. She had suspected the affair, but seeing it splashed across every newspaper was painful. She couldn't escape it. Friends called to offer support, but their words didn't help. Her marriage was falling apart, and now the world knew. Meanwhile, Donald found himself stuck between two worlds. On one side, there was his wife, the mother of his children, a woman who had helped him build his empire. On the other side, there was Marla, who made him feel alive. He didn't know what to do. Marla wanted him to make a decision. "I can't keep living like this," she told him one night over dinner. Her eyes filled with tears. "If you love me, then prove it." Donald took her hand. "I care about you," he said. But he still wasn't ready to leave his marriage. Marla felt trapped. She couldn't move forward, and she couldn't go back. As the months passed, the affair continued. The media frenzy grew worse. Reporters followed Donald and Marla to hotels and vacations, documenting their every move. The scandal affected Donald's business too. Investors and partners were concerned. They wanted to know if he was focused on deals or distracted by personal issues. The pressure built until Donald could no longer ignore it. His relationship with Ivana had become unsalvageable. The love they once shared had been replaced by resentment and betrayal. The divorce proceedings began in 1991, and they quickly became messy. But even as Donald's marriage crumbled, his relationship with Marla wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Marla wanted stability, a commitment that went beyond secret dates and late-night phone calls. Donald, however, thrived on unpredictability. He loved the thrill of the chase, but wasn't sure if he wanted to settle down again so soon. One evening, Marla confronted him. "Are you serious about us? Or am I just another part of your success story?" Donald was quiet for a moment. "I want you in my life," he said. But Marla could tell that he wasn't ready to fully commit. She wondered if she had made a mistake by falling for him. As the divorce with Ivana finalized in 1992, Donald and Marla's relationship became more public. They attended events together, posed for photos, and smiled for the cameras. But behind the smiles, there was uncertainty. Marla wasn't sure if Donald truly loved her, or if she was simply filling a void. In 1993, Marla became pregnant with their daughter Tiffany. For a brief moment, everything seemed to fall into place. Donald proposed, and they married in December of that year in a grand ceremony. Marla hoped that marriage would bring them closer. But Donald's mind was always on business. He worked long hours, often traveling and attending meetings. Marla felt lonely. She had traded one kind of uncertainty for another. Was this what she had dreamed of when she first met him? Despite the challenges, Donald loved his new daughter, Tiffany. He doted on her when he was home, often calling her a little star. Marla believed that their family could still work, but the cracks were hard to ignore. By 1996, the tension between them had reached its peak. Marla wanted more emotional support, but Donald wasn't the type to slow down. Their conversations turned into arguments. Their once passionate romance had become a series of conflicts. One evening, after yet another disagreement, Marla packed her bags. She knew their relationship couldn't survive much longer. In 1999, they officially divorced. For Donald, the end of his marriage to Marla wasn't as publicized as his divorce from Ivana. But it marked another turning point in his personal life. He had loved Marla, but in the end, their relationship wasn't built to last. Years later, Marla reflected on their time together. "It was magical at first," she said, "but sometimes love isn't enough." Donald moved on, as he always did, but the lessons of his relationship with Marla stayed with him. Lessons about passion, loyalty, and the cost of chasing excitement over stability. Before we begin Chapter 6, a quick note for our listeners. You're currently listening to this audiobook on Woo English. Remember, this content is specially made for Woo English listeners only. If you're hearing it on any other channel, it may be a violation of Woo-English's rights. Please ensure you're tuned in to the right source to fully enjoy and respect this audiobook journey. Now, let's continue the story. Chapter 6. A Second Marriage, A Second Chance. 1993. It was December 1993. The air was cold, but the excitement in New York City was electric. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits entered the grand ballroom, eager to witness Donald Trump's second wedding. Cameras flashed as limousines pulled up, one after another. The media called it a star-studded affair, a celebration of wealth, love, and new beginnings. Marla Maples stood at the entrance, radiant in a long white silk gown. Her golden hair shimmered under the soft lights. She smiled, but behind that smile was a woman hoping this marriage would be different. She wanted this to last. Donald waited at the altar, confident and composed. He wore a classic black tuxedo. His gaze never left Marla as she walked down the aisle. To the crowd, they looked perfect. But life is never as perfect as it seems. The ceremony was lavish, just like everything Donald did. After exchanging vows, the couple shared a kiss while applause filled the room. Friends and family gathered for the reception, where chandeliers sparkled and champagne flowed freely. There was laughter, music, and heartfelt toasts. Donald, always the showman, thanked everyone for attending. "Here's to a beautiful future," he said, raising his glass. For a moment, everything felt possible. A new chapter had begun. In the months that followed, life seemed peaceful. Marla settled into her role as Donald's wife, balancing her own ambitions with the responsibilities of marriage. In October 1993, she gave birth to their daughter, Tiffany. The birth was a joyful moment. Marla held her newborn in her arms and whispered, "You're my little miracle." Donald was proud too. He visited Marla and Tiffany in the hospital, cradling his new baby in his arms. "She's going to do great things," he said with a smile. Back at home, Marla dedicated herself to being a mother. She wanted to give Tiffany a warm, loving environment. Their apartment was luxurious, with sweeping views of the city, but Marla made sure it felt like a home. She decorated the nursery with soft colors and filled it with toys. She read bedtime stories and sang lullabies, savoring every moment. Donald adored Tiffany, but didn't spend much time at home. He was busy, as always, running his real estate empire. Meetings, deals, and public appearances filled his schedule. When he did come home, he often had phone calls to take or contracts to review. Marla tried to understand. She knew who Donald was when she married him, a man who thrived on success and attention. But as time went on, the distance between them grew. One evening, after putting Tiffany to bed, Marla waited for Donald in the living room. The clock ticked past 10 p.m., but he still wasn't home. She sighed and leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The sound of the door opening made her sit up. Donald walked in, loosening his tie. He looked tired, but unfazed. "Long day," he said, kissing her on the cheek. "We need to talk," Marla replied softly. Donald sat down, but didn't seem fully present. "What's on your mind?" "I feel like we're living separate lives," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You're always working. I'm here with Tiffany, and we barely spend time together." Donald rubbed his temples. "You knew my life when we got married, Marla. It hasn't changed." "I know," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "But that doesn't make it any easier." The conversation ended without a solution. Donald went to bed, and Marla sat alone, wondering if love was enough to bridge the gap between them. To outsiders, their life still looked glamorous. They attended charity galas, posed for photos at movie premieres, and smiled for the cameras. But behind the public appearances, their relationship was struggling. Marla wanted more than just material wealth. She wanted emotional connection, someone to share her dreams with. Donald, on the other hand, was focused on his business goals. He couldn't slow down. As time passed, Marla began to feel lonely. She confided in close friends, expressing her fears about the marriage. "I don't want to be another chapter in his success story," she said. "I want to be his partner, not just his wife." Donald wasn't blind to Marla's feelings, but he didn't know how to fix things. His life had always been about moving forward, chasing the next big opportunity. To him, slowing down meant falling behind. In 1996, tension reached its peak. Small disagreements turned into arguments. One night, after a heated discussion, Marla packed a bag and left the apartment. She stayed at a friend's house, unsure of what her next move would be. Donald called her the next morning. "Come back," he said. "We can work this out." Marla returned, but the damage had already been done. The cracks in their relationship were too deep. They tried counseling, but the differences between them couldn't be resolved. Donald's world was too fast-paced, and Marla wanted something he couldn't give: time, attention, and emotional support. By 1997, the separation became official. The divorce process was quieter than Donald's previous split with Ivana. There were no explosive headlines this time, but the pain was still there. Marla reflected on the love they had shared. It had been real, but it hadn't been enough. For Tiffany, the divorce was confusing at first, but Marla worked hard to create a stable environment. She wanted her daughter to feel safe and loved despite the changes. Donald remained involved in Tiffany's life, but Marla took on most of the parenting responsibilities. Years later, Marla admitted that she had entered the marriage with hope, but also with uncertainty. "I thought we could make it work," she said in an interview. "But sometimes, love isn't enough when two people want different things." Donald, reflecting on their time together, described Marla as a wonderful woman, but he also admitted that their lifestyles didn't match. "I was always focused on the future," he said, "and sometimes I didn't see what was right in front of me. The end of their marriage marked another turning point in Donald's personal life. He had experienced love, passion, and loss once again. But just like before, he moved forward, carrying the lessons with him. For Marla, the divorce was a new beginning. She focused on raising Tiffany and building a career of her own. The second chance she had hoped for with Donald had ended, but she found strength in starting over. Their story was one of romance, ambition, and differences they couldn't overcome. But it wasn't a story of failure. It was a story of growth for both of them. Chapter 7. Cracks in the Foundation. The days of excitement and romance were slipping away. Donald Trump and Marla Maples had once shared laughter, love, and dreams of a bright future. But now, the cracks in their relationship were showing, and they couldn't be ignored. Marla sat by the window of their luxury apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the night. It was quiet, but her mind wasn't. She thought about how different things had become. Donald was always busy, always moving forward. She felt like she was being left behind. In the early days of their marriage, she had tried to fit into his world. She attended charity events, mingled with powerful people, and smiled for the cameras. But behind her smile was a woman struggling to find her place. Donald had built an empire through hard work, charm, and risk-taking. Success was in his blood, but success also had a cost. His days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and travel. There was little time for Marla. When they were together, his mind often wandered to business deals. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Marla tried to talk about their daughter, Tiffany. "She said her first sentence today," Marla said, her eyes lighting up. Donald nodded, but barely looked up from his phone. "That's great," he replied without emotion. Marla's heart sank. She missed the version of Donald who had once listened, who had once cared deeply about the small things. But the Donald was disappearing, buried under layers of work and ambition. For Donald, life was moving too fast to stop and reflect. He had new projects in the works, buildings to construct, partnerships to manage, and investments to secure. His empire demanded his attention. The media, always eager to report on his every move, followed him closely. Headlines praised him one day and criticized him the next. The pressure was constant. Every decision he made was scrutinized. If a deal succeeded, he was a genius. If it failed, the media pounced. He had learned to live with the stress, but Marla struggled with it. She wasn't used to the spotlight, and it made her uneasy. Paparazzi followed her whenever she left the apartment. Reporters asked invasive questions about her marriage. "Is everything okay between you and Donald?" they asked. Marla smiled politely and walked away, but their words stayed with her. Was everything okay? At home, the tension grew. Small disagreements turned into arguments. Marla wanted more of Donald's time, but he couldn't give it to her. "I'm doing this for us," he said during one heated conversation. "I'm building a future." "But what about the present?" Marla shot back. "I don't feel like I'm part of your life anymore." Donald sighed and rubbed his temples. "This is who I am, Marla. You knew that when we got married." She did know. But knowing didn't make it easier. She had thought love would be enough to bridge the gap between them. But the gap was widening. Marla tried to fill the emptiness by focusing on Tiffany. She took her to parks, playdates, and music classes. Being a mother brought her joy, but even that couldn't erase the loneliness she felt when Donald wasn't around. At night, when Tiffany was asleep, Marla often sat alone, wondering if things would ever change. Donald noticed the distance, but didn't know how to fix it. His solution had always been to work harder, to prove himself through success. But success couldn't solve this problem. Marla needed more than material comfort. She needed emotional connection. One evening, after returning from a business trip, Donald found Marla sitting in the living room, a suitcase by her side. His heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm leaving for a few days," Marla said quietly. "I need time to think." Donald sat down, unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to feeling helpless. "We can fix this," he said finally. Marla shook her head. "I don't know if we can." She left that night, staying at a friend's house to clear her mind. She loved Donald, but love wasn't enough to erase the pain of feeling invisible. During her time away, Marla reflected on their relationship. She thought about the good times, their beach walks, the nights spent talking about dreams, the birth of Tiffany. But those memories felt distant now, overshadowed by the weight of disappointment. Donald, too, spent those days thinking. He realized how much he had taken Marla for granted. But his pride held him back from admitting it. Apologizing wasn't something he did easily. Instead, he focused on work, hoping that time would heal their wounds. When Marla returned, things seemed calm at first. They tried to rebuild their connection, spending more time together as a family. But the cracks in their foundation were too deep. The same issues resurfaced. Donald's work continued to take priority, and Marla continued to feel neglected. By 1996, the strain was unbearable. One night, after yet another argument, Marla packed her bags again. This time, it wasn't just for a few days. "I can't do this anymore," she told Donald. "I need something you can't give me." Donald didn't argue. He knew she was right. Their love had faded, and both of them were exhausted from trying to hold it together. Divorce was the only option left. In 1997, they officially separated. The divorce was finalized in 1999. Unlike Donald's previous split with Ivana, this breakup was quieter. There were no explosive headlines, no courtroom battles. Both of them wanted to move on peacefully for Tiffany's sake. After the divorce, Marla focused on raising Tiffany. She wanted to give her daughter a normal life away from the chaos of public attention. Donald remained involved, visiting Tiffany and making sure she had everything she needed. But the relationship between him and Marla was over. Years later, Marla reflected on their marriage with mixed emotions. "We had good times," she said, "but we were too different. Donald lived for the future, and I needed someone who lived in the present." Donald, too, reflected on their time together. "Marla was a wonderful woman," he admitted. "But sometimes love isn't enough to overcome differences." Their story was one of passion, ambition, and lessons learned the hard way. Both of them grew from the experience, carrying those lessons into their futures. Chapter 8. Melania enters the picture. 1998. It was 1998, and Donald Trump was once again a single man. His divorce from Marla Maples had been finalized, and he was back in New York City, building new projects and attending glamorous parties. He was no stranger to attention. The media followed him everywhere. But despite his busy public life, Donald often felt something was missing. Then, one evening, at a high-profile fashion event during New York Fashion Week, he met her. Melania Knaus stood out in the crowd. She wasn't loud or flashy. Her beauty was understated, natural. She had striking cheekbones, deep eyes, and an air of quiet confidence. She was a model from Slovenia, a woman with her own story. Donald noticed her immediately. He walked over, introduced himself, and smiled the way he always did when he wanted to make an impression. "Melania," he said smoothly, "it's a pleasure to meet you." She smiled back, polite but cautious. Donald was used to women being impressed by him, but Melania was different. She wasn't in awe of his wealth or fame. She didn't fall into his charm easily, and that intrigued him. She made him want to know more. Over the next few days, Donald couldn't stop thinking about her. He called, invited her to dinner, and slowly she agreed. Their first date was elegant but simple. Melania was quiet at first, but Donald liked that. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just being herself. During dinner, she told him about her childhood in Slovenia. She described her small town, her family, and how she had dreamed of becoming a model. She had worked hard to reach New York, and she wasn't planning to leave anytime soon. Donald listened carefully, something he didn't always do with others. Her calm voice made him feel at ease. As their relationship grew, they spent time together in New York's finest restaurants, at charity galas, and on private trips. Donald was known for moving fast in relationships, but this time he took things slower. He wanted to make sure this was real. Melania liked his confidence and ambition, but she also saw a softer side of him, one that the public didn't often see. He could be funny, thoughtful, and even vulnerable, but she also knew what she was getting into. Donald's life was full of attention, interviews, and photographers. Being with him meant being in the spotlight. One evening, as they strolled through Central Park, Donald turned to her. "How do you feel about the media following us?" he asked. Melania shrugged. "It's not easy," she admitted, "but I know what I signed up for." Donald admired her honesty. Many women wanted the fame that came with being part of his world, but Melania didn't. She valued her privacy. She wanted to be seen as more than just Donald Trump's girlfriend. The media, however, was quick to label her. Headlines called her Donald's new mystery woman and speculated about their future. Paparazzi camped outside her apartment, hoping to capture moments of her daily life. Melania tried to ignore it, but the pressure was real. Despite the challenges, their bond grew stronger. In 1999, Donald began hinting that Melania could be the one. He described her as supportive and steady, someone who balanced his high-energy lifestyle. But not everyone was convinced. Friends warned him that Melania's quiet nature might clash with his bold personality. "She's different from the others," Donald would say in response. And he liked that difference. Melania didn't compete with him. She complimented him. Their relationship wasn't perfect, though. Melania had moments of doubt. Could she handle being with a man who lived under constant public scrutiny? Could she build a life with someone who was always focused on the next deal, the next project? One night, as they sat on Donald's private jet flying back from an event in Los Angeles, Melania voiced her concerns. "I want a family someday," she said softly, "but I don't want to raise children in chaos." Donald nodded, understanding her fears. "We'll figure it out," he promised. "I won't let this life overwhelm us." For a while, things remained calm. Melania focused on her modeling career, and Donald continued expanding his business empire. They found a rhythm: dinners at home, weekends in Florida, and quiet nights watching movies. It was the calm before the storm. In 2000, Donald briefly considered running for president under the Reform Party. The idea of being First Lady worried Melania. She wasn't interested in politics, and the thought of being in the public eye even more frightened her. "What if this isn't what I'm meant for?" she asked him one night. Donald reassured her. "If I ever run, you'll be great. But right now, we're just living our lives." Their relationship continued to evolve. Melania learned to handle the press more confidently. She began appearing in interviews, though she was careful with her words. She wasn't a woman who needed to be in the spotlight, but she knew how to survive in it. By 2004, Donald and Melania's relationship had matured. They attended high-profile events together, and the media began speculating about marriage. But Melania didn't rush him. She had learned to be patient, and Donald respected that. Then, in 2004, during a quiet dinner at one of their favorite New York restaurants, Donald proposed. The engagement ring was extravagant. A 15-carat diamond that sparkled like the city skyline. Melania smiled, but it wasn't the ring that made her say yes. It was the belief that despite their differences, they could build a life together. In 2005, they married in a grand ceremony in Palm Beach, Florida. The guest list included celebrities, business leaders, and political figures. Melania's dress designed by Dior, made headlines. It was a moment of luxury and celebration, but for Melania, it was also a moment of reflection. She was stepping into a new chapter, one that would test her strength and patience. As the years went on, Melania would face challenges she couldn't yet imagine. But in 1998, as she walked hand in hand with Donald through the streets of New York, she didn't think about the future. She was simply living in the moment, enjoying the calm before the storm. Chapter 9. Building a New Life Together, 2005. It was a day of luxury and glamour. On January 22, 2005, Donald Trump and Melania Knauss were married in Palm Beach, Florida. The venue was the famous Mar-a-Lago estate, a grand mansion with crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and golden accents. Guests arrived in designer dresses and tailored suits. Celebrities, business leaders, and political figures filled the room. It was a wedding that only Donald could have imagined. Melania wore a custom-made Dior gown with a long train and delicate embroidery. The dress sparkled under the lights, making her look like royalty. Donald, in a sharp black tuxedo, stood confidently at the altar. As Melania walked toward him, he smiled. A rare, genuine smile that revealed more than words ever could. When they exchanged vows, the world was watching. Cameras flashed, recording every moment. But for Melania, this wasn't just a public event. It was personal. She believed in this new beginning. She wanted to build a life with Donald, to support him and stand by his side, even if the road ahead wasn't easy. After the ceremony, the reception was grand. There were towering cakes, live music, and endless toasts. Donald, ever the showman, thanked the guests and praised Melania in his speech. "I am the luckiest man in the world," he said. For a moment, it felt like a fairy tale. But life after the wedding would be far from simple. A few months after their marriage, Melania discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and nervous excitement. Donald was pleased too. He had children from his previous marriages, but the thought of a new baby with Melania made him happy. It felt like another step in their journey together. In March 2006, Melania gave birth to a son, Baron William Trump. The birth brought warmth and energy to their home. Melania adored Baron and dedicated herself to raising him. She was a hands-on mother, changing diapers, preparing bottles, and reading bedtime stories. Her days were filled with lullabies and laughter. Donald, though proud of Baron, remained focused on his work. He visited when he could, but business was always calling. Meetings, interviews, and new deals consumed his time. Melania understood this. She had accepted it from the start. But there were moments when she wished he would slow down. One evening, Melania sat on the couch with Baron sleeping peacefully in her arms. Donald entered the room, carrying a stack of papers. He kissed her on the cheek, but didn't stay long. "I have a meeting in the morning," he said. Melania nodded, hiding her disappointment. She knew this was the life she had married into, but it still hurt sometimes. She felt the weight of raising Barron mostly on her own. As Barron grew, Melania became his protector. She shielded him from the media and ensured he had a normal childhood despite their famous last name. She taught him Slovenian, her native language, and emphasized the importance of family values. "Always be kind," she told him, "and never forget where you come from." Meanwhile, Donald's ambitions continued to grow. He expanded his business empire, launched new ventures, and maintained his role as a public figure. The couple attended events together, but their worlds often felt separate. Melania preferred quiet moments at home, while Donald thrived in the spotlight. The media paid close attention to their marriage. Reporters speculated about how Melania felt living in Donald's shadow. Was she happy? Did she regret marrying a man who was always on the move? Melania rarely spoke publicly about their private life. She valued privacy and didn't believe in sharing too much. One interview, however, revealed her strength. When asked how she handled being married to such a powerful man, she replied, "I'm not just a wife. I have my own mind, my own goals." This statement showed that while she supported Donald, she was also her own person. But their differences weren't always easy to navigate. Donald was used to being the center of attention, and sometimes Melania felt overshadowed. At public events, he often dominated conversations, leaving her to stand quietly by his side. Friends noticed and wondered if she was truly content. Behind closed doors, they had their challenges. Donald's demanding schedule meant missed dinners and canceled plans. Melania was patient, but even her patience had limits. One evening, after a long day with Barron, she confronted him. "We need more time as a family," she said. "Barron misses you." Donald sighed. "I'm doing everything for our future," he replied. "I'm building something important." "I know," Melania said softly. "But we need you here, too." It wasn't an easy conversation, but it made Donald think. He loved his family, even if he didn't always show it the way Melania wanted. Over the next few weeks, he made an effort to spend more time at home. There were family dinners, trips to the park, and quiet nights watching television. For a while, life felt balanced. Still, Donald's larger-than-life personality couldn't be contained for long. He was always dreaming of the next big project. In 2015, when he announced his campaign for president, their world changed once again. The media frenzy intensified, and Melania found herself in the spotlight more than ever. Reporters analyzed her every move, her fashion choices, and even her accent. But Melania remained calm, just as she had from the beginning. She stood by Donald's side during speeches and rallies, offering her support. When asked how she managed the pressure, she responded simply, "I focus on my family." It was her way of staying grounded amid the chaos. Donald admired her strength, even if he didn't always say it out loud. He knew that Melania was different from the women in his past. She didn't seek fame. She sought stability. And that's what made her special to him. As the campaign progressed, Melania's role expanded. She spoke at events, gave interviews, and defended Donald when critics attacked him. But at home, she remained the same. A devoted mother and a private woman who valued peace. In 2016, as the presidential race reached its peak, Melania prepared for the possibility of a new life in the White House. She wasn't sure if she was ready for such a major change, but she knew one thing for certain. She would always be there for her family. The foundation of her marriage was built on patience, loyalty, and understanding. But with Donald's ambitions reaching new heights, she wondered how long that foundation could hold. Could she continue to be the anchor in a life constantly on the move? Only time would tell. Chapter 10. Love in the Shadow of Power, 2016. In June 2015, Donald Trump stood in the lobby of Trump Tower and made a bold announcement. He was running for president. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward, ready to capture every word. His speech was filled with promises, controversy, and ambition, just like the man himself. In the audience, Melania watched quietly. She smiled when Donald looked her way, but inside she felt unsure. This was a new world for her. She had grown used to the media following their every move, but a political campaign would bring a different kind of attention. That night, as they returned home, Melania sat on the couch while Donald poured himself a glass of water. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of traffic outside. "Are you ready for this?" Donald asked, sitting next to her. Melania hesitated. "It will be hard," she admitted, "but I will support you." Donald nodded. "We'll face it together," he said confidently. But facing it wouldn't be easy. Almost immediately, the media turned its spotlight on Melania. They wanted to know everything about her: her childhood in Slovenia, her modeling career, her accent, and her marriage. They analyzed her every move, searching for flaws. At first, Melania tried to ignore the noise. She focused on raising Barron and maintaining her privacy. But the questions kept coming. Reporters asked if she would be a traditional First Lady or if she had ambitions of her own. Some doubted her ability to handle the role. One morning, while reading the news, Melania came across a harsh headline. "Is Melania ready for the White House?" Her heart sank. She had always been a private person, and now the world was questioning her every step. Could she handle the pressure? Donald, on the other hand, thrived on attention. He was bold, outspoken, and unafraid of controversy. He loved the energy of rallies, the roar of the crowd, and the thrill of debate. But his boldness often brought criticism. Scandals surfaced. News outlets played clips of his controversial comments. Opponents attacked him, calling him unfit for office. Melania stood by him even when the criticism turned personal. At rallies, she smiled and waved. At home, she stayed calm, even when the weight of the campaign felt overwhelming. But behind her calm exterior, she had her struggles. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this. One night, as Donald prepared for a debate, Melania sat with him in the living room. Papers covered the coffee table. Barron was asleep in his room, and the apartment was unusually quiet. "Are you okay?" Donald asked, noticing her distant expression. Melania looked up. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm the right person for this." Donald put down his notes and sat beside her. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "You've handled everything so far." Melania sighed. "But this is different. It's not just about us anymore. It's about the whole country watching." Donald wrapped an arm around her. "You're doing great," he said. "Trust me." Melania tried to believe him, but as the campaign intensified, so did the pressure. Scandals from Donald's past resurfaced. Late-night talk shows mocked them. Reporters speculated about the state of their marriage. One tabloid headline read, "Trouble at home for the Trumps?" Melania hated the gossip. It felt invasive, cruel. But she never reacted publicly. She knew that silence could be powerful. When asked about the rumors during an interview, she simply said, "We are fine. People like to talk, but we know the truth." Still, the tension at home was real. Donald's schedule became busier, with campaign stops in multiple states and meetings with advisors. Melania rarely saw him for more than a few hours each day. When he was home, he was often on the phone or watching news coverage of the campaign.